On to our latest story. Approximately 6 nights ago, off the coast of Orange Beach, Alabama, the personal party yacht owned by Senator Arthur Sanders was viciously attacked by a diseased Spinosaurus. It is now confirmed that this dinosaur is part of the group of diseased dinosaurs some are calling the Pack. At what must have been the last second, the survivors were saved by several men who represent a company known as Biosyn. 3 days later, in a small neighborhood in Atlanta, a family was saved from the Allosaurus by these same people. CEO of Biosyn, former InGen biologist Henry Wu, has called for a petition for all major governors of the U.S. to sign a contract providing their total funding to their investments for protection from this outbreak of attacks. While I can honestly say that the efforts Biosyn are making is exceptionally grand, the demands that they are pressing in on our doorstep cannot be supplied by my people. Speaking as a diplomat in the name of our nation, sacrifices do not always have to be made. My construction workers are hard at work building an electrified fence around our city of California. This city, which is among the only cities of this world not to be attacked by these deranged creatures, uses its own wealth to put into the materials required for such a measure. Therefore, we will be forced to pass this proposal. Claire sat in her chair in the office, waiting and watching the screen along with her companions. Ellie sat close to her old paleontologist friend Alan, while Ian stood next to the wall with Maxin. Zia and Franklin sat on the other side of the room in their seats. The news that they had just witnessed was unlike any sensation they felt chill itself down their spines. Well, anyone gonna say something? Someone wanna talk first? Franklin finally said. Be my guest, Ian said, clearly intimidated by Maxin's grim expression. Henry, Claire breathed. I'm sorry I doubted you, Zia. Zia, who had encountered the devious doctor once before, remembered that day very well. He seemed to be rather peeved when she told him that Blue's blood was no longer pure. She had hoped that after Franklin had drugged him, the explosion that had happened shortly afterward would have killed him. But no, apparently he was still alive, not to mention that he was working with InGen's archenemy. The only answer that Zia could give was, no problem. So these guys must have something to do with these attacks, Grant sat forward. We know that much, but the question is, why are they doing it? Biosyn's always tried to outshine InGen's idea for cloning dinosaurs, Maxin said. At least that's what I've dug up. After the second park fell, they started bombing Site B to try and make dinosaurs more endangered. Wait a minute. Claire was surprised by this. We sent InGen mercenaries to scout the island and bring us new species back in 2014. But when they got there, they said that the government destroyed it. So there's no way the Spino could be here. Those men you sent are actually with Biosyn. Maxin leaned against the back of Alan and Ellie's chair. I've seen poachers beating animals into submission, but I've never seen anything like what they've been doing. So do we have like a plan or something? Zia asked. Grant stood up. Well, from what the news report tells us, the Senator of California has denied the rights to let Biosyn protect his state. If Wu was watching this as well, then they must be the next targets. What we need to do is get down there and see if we can evacuate the city and fill them in on everything. So basically we'd be going to California, right when they're in the middle of building a 50-foot tall electric fence around the whole darn nation, Zia questioned. Ms. Rodriguez is right. Easier said than done. Ian put his hands together. The U.S. Embassy may not be so willing to give us a free ride past their security. Before more could be said on this pressing matter, A loud blaring could be heard from throughout the building as a red light began to flash. The members of the DPG were all running about, chattering and clamoring loudly. Claire and the others hurriedly exited the office and ran down the stairs. She had stopped Lowry abruptly. "Lowry, what's happening?" "Something tripped the security systems outside our perimeter," Lowry answered. "Something big." "It's the T-Rex. It's the T-Rex. It's the T-Rex," Franklin muttered to himself. "Would you please?" Zia snapped at him. "The T-Rex hasn't been seen for a year." A strange sound from outside could barely be heard from the blaring alarms. It was like a sort of bellow, something akin to that of a whale. Claire could have sworn she had heard this sound from somewhere before. After a short bit of thinking back, she remembered. It was when they had just snuck aboard the SS Venture 3 years ago. The inferno that engulfed the island. That beautiful island. The dinosaurs that had survived it were captured and loaded harshly into the loading deck. And as the boat was leaving, with her, Franklin, and Owen having snuck aboard, then did she look back and see it. A lone Brachiosaurus. They had captured a good few of them, but had left a single individual behind. This long-necked beauty strutted slowly down the dock that they had just abandoned. It cried out to them in its woeful song. A melody such as this was unlike any that had graced a human's ears. It even put the poetic form of Shakespeare and Sophocles to a low, forgotten shame. What stung Claire the most was that it knew it was not going to survive this destruction. And it wanted to do one more thing before it was forced to leave this world. What this dinosaur seemed to represent was the fact that it was the first dinosaur encountered during the very first tour so long ago. And it wanted all those watching to remember. It stood on its hind legs, just as the sulfur was approaching, and let out one last moan. The dark clouds of death, brightened by the light of the lava, surrounded it. The Brachiosaurus' final moan seemed to be saying something to them. Not what they heard, not that they heard it, or even cared for that matter. But Claire did. And she heard it, and she could understand it as well. Goodbye. She then ran to the nearest exit, hoping to see what was making such a noise. Whether it truly was a brachiosaur or not was beyond her, but she had to find out what it was doing out there in the cold. Zia led the way after her. "Claire?" The group ran out the same door as she did, feeling the coldness of the falling snow outside on their skin again. They saw Claire standing there, staring up at something. And they saw exactly what it was. It looked like a Brachiosaurus, but at the same time it looked like something utterly different. The skin was a dark green with spots and stripes on it. Atop the head ran a red crest, standing high off the ground, courtesy of that long neck. The dinosaur moaned that familiar moan as it stared down at them, those golden orange eyes scanning them intently. The falling snow around it did not seem to bother it, as it merely stood there, not even shaking. It's like it's not even cold, Grant commented as he observed it, taking in a deja vu moment at the same time. He had seen this variant of Brachiosaur once before. "This is one of the ones from Sorna." Claire seemed almost breathless at this marvel. "But how did they escape the bombing?" "They are rather gifted at swimming," Maxin said. I've seen sauropods from all around the globe, and each of them are semi-aquatic. Once I even saw a herd swim across the Atlantic. I'm guessing that their genes from before they were cloned seem to have stuck around, even with the frog DNA. Wait a minute. Franklin seemed as though he didn't believe what he was hearing, and rightfully so. Are you telling me these guys swam over 100 miles across the ocean? Exactly, Mr. Webb, Franklin answered. And it's not just the brachios. All kinds of dinosaurs have been known to swim. Before Maxin could continue with his observation, a loud snorting sound could be heard. Everyone turned their heads to see at least 8 other dinosaurs walking their way. The first ones, who looked to be the adults, stood at 4 meters tall and looked much more like the better-known Triceratops. But there was a bigger difference between them. The frills had what looked like pointy spikes pointing out at each side. And instead of having 3 horns, there was only 1 protruding from the snout. There were at least 3 adults and 5 young ones, which were at the center of the large ones. One of them turned towards Claire and company and snorted at them before giving a hooting holler kind of sound. The Brachio looked out at the small dinosaurs and grunted as if it welcomed them from coming so far. Well, it looks like he's not our only visitor, Ellie said as she watched them. Alan, do you know what those are? Styracosaurus, Grant answered, clearly awestruck. One of the more formidable of the ceratopsians. But what are they doing out here? Ian asked. And our larger-than-life friend here, for that matter. You'd think they'd be somewhere a little more their taste, a little more, green. I've seen these kinds of dinosaurs in the outback, Maxin said, watching them. No one wanted to hunt them. Didn't have trophy rooms big enough. Quite frankly, I wouldn't either. Horns like that. Hey, Claire. Lori, dressed in a black and yellow jacket, had just stepped out and caught up with them, almost having a heart attack at seeing the Brachio. What is it, Lori? You better come see this report. As confirmed by Biosyn representative Lewis Dodson, a construction team has been dispatched to various locations across the world to clear out forest locations and set up Biosyn bases. This action will be used to make it so their troops will be on guard for any further attacks. Okay, turn it off. Claire waved at Lowry, who complied. This news report had pretty much explained everything that the group was just wondering outside. They had recently been speaking about the matter of Biosyn, and now they knew what they were going up against. It seemed as if the dinosaurs outside their base were driven from their homes by Biosyn's construction. Now, it seemed like they had nowhere else to go. Just like the DPG. This was why Claire was fighting. She wanted a world where dinosaurs could be free like they used to be in days long past. Ever since the Lockwood incident, those efforts were almost put into complete jeopardy. So, what's the plan? Ian eventually asked. Well, I think it's pretty obvious, Zia said. We go to California and tell them about everything that's happening. But they believe everything that Wu's saying, Franklin said. What's going to take for them to believe us? Find fire with fire. That's what's going to take. Grant held his fedora in his hand. We're going to have to keep low-key and give a little bit of effort. In short, we'll have to sabotage their next attacks. Well, I believe I can help you there, Grant. Ian had done a bit of sabotage on corrupt operations once before. This action had much to do with dinosaurs. Count me in, Zia said. Same. Franklin raised his hand. I'm in. Ellie stood up. If it means preserving the future of a species that had been brought from extinction, then I will do what I can, Maxin said, who had been leaning against the wall as per usual. Had nodded. Now, does anyone have a way to get there? Grant asked. Everyone looked at Claire, Well, we do have a boat.